After her parents die, a young high school girl becomes homeless and lives a simple life in a tent in the forest. There she meets the member of Sohma family, who own the grounds in the forest, and finds they turn into animals when they are hugged by the opposite sex. Episode 1. On one fine day, Tohru Honda is going to school. Having plenty of time to get into the classes, she starts to explore the place that she recently moved into. She was surprised when she saw the big house nearby. She sneaks into the house and wonders who would live in the middle of the forest. There she finds the beautiful Chinese zodiac animal figures. As Tohru is watching the figures, the house owner Sohma approaches her and says he is surprised to see a young girl around there. Tohru gets shocked, quickly apologizes for trespassing, and says the zodiac animal figures are adorable. She tells him these figures are her favorites and they are incomplete without a cat figure. Sohma was surprised to know that the young people are still believing those Chinese zodiac tales. She tells Sohma that her mother used to tell the zodiac story. Once upon a time, God made an invitation and said he was having a banquet tomorrow, and all the animals were invited to come. But the rat pranked his neighbor's cat, telling him that the banquet is actually the day after tomorrow. On the banquet day, Rat rode on the ox's back and easily arrived first at the destination, followed by the ox, tiger, and rabbit, and all the animals arrived at the banquet, except the cat, and was left alone. Tohru begins to cry and feels sorry for the innocent cat. She wishes to switch her birth year from dog to cat and says she wants to be a cat. Speaking of the dog's birth year, Sohma tells her that he already came close to her. When Sohma was about to reveal his secret, his little cousin Sohma bumped him on the head with his school bag and asked him to keep it quiet. They both greet each other by saying their names. Seeing this, Sohma asks if they both know each other. Yuki says that they are classmates and asks Tohru why she visited his home in the morning. She replied that she lives nearby and accidentally found his house. Sohma and Yuki suspect Tohru because all the grounds in the forest belong to the Sohma family members. Tohru can't let his classmate know that she is living in a tent, so she leaves their house and runs away. Yuki stops her and asks if they can walk to school together. At school, Yuki's fangirls are yelling at Tohru for visiting his house and walking along with him. They warn her not to stick with their prince Yuki. She apologized and said that was an accident, but they didn't let go of her. At that moment, Tohru's friends Arisa and Sake came to help her, and scared the hell out of them. They were still arguing with them, so Sake glared and used her waves, and they ran away. After that, the three of them are talking about Yuki in the cooking class, saying he threw down the second-year high school girl when she confessed her love and tried to hug him. Arisa asks Tohru if she can join them for shopping. Tohru denied it and said she has to work after school. Arisa and Sake know about her parents' deaths and believe she is staying with her grandfather right now. She promised her grandfather that she would pay tuition fees by herself, and she wished to buy a new home after graduation, so she is really working hard to save money. Arisa wonders why her grandfather would not feed her properly, so she asks Tohru to eat well and get strong. Tohru can't tell them that she is living in the tent, because if Arisa and Sake knew about this, they would have run into her grandfather and demanded an answer for letting her to stay alone in the forest. So she kept it secret. As Tohru is leaving for work, she meets Yuki at the locker room and thanks him for helping her in the morning. As the two of them are walking together, Yuki asks why she wanted to be a cat. She said she was sorry for acting weird in his house. But then she gets surprised when Yuki begins to talk badly about cats. He tells her all the zodiac animals were begun as part of a system for telling times. Later, they were related to the yin and yang elements and became the fortune-telling tools. There is no room left for the cat to begin with, and it's best to stay alone rather than be a part of the zodiac animals. Tohru got confused and asked if he was trying to say that he hated cats. Yuki turned and smiled at her. Tohru blushed, and they both stared at each other. Suddenly, her alarm goes off and reminds her that she has to go to work. As Tohru leaves, Yuki stops her, takes off the leaf from her head, and asks her not to push herself too much. Tohru couldn't read Yuki and thought he was a mystery person, and he walks away. And there are time jumps to her childhood. When she was 3 years old, her father died of sickness, and her mother worked super hard to take care of them. She helped her mother whenever she could. She always looked up to her and wanted to be strong just like her. Unfortunately, her mother died in a car accident, and she became homeless. Her relatives argued over who would take care of her, but in the end, her grandfather was the one who agreed to take care of Tohru. She knows her grandfather is living on his pension, and she doesn't want to be a burden on him. She promised her grandfather that she would pay tuition fees and living expenses all by herself. However, her grandfather told her that he was going to stay with his daughter for a while, saying he would return after renovation, and until then, he asked Tohru to stay at her friend's house. She couldn't stay with her friends for months because her friends also living in a small house. So she decided to get strong just like her mother, and moved on to the forest with a tent. However, living in a tent in the forest won't be easy. She works super hard to buy her own home after graduation. Back in time, Yuki and Shigeru are returning to their home after having dinner at the restaurant, and they find Tohru walking heavily into the forest and wonder what she is doing on their private family land in the late night. As Tohru arrived at her home tent, she greeted her mother and took a towel to take a bath. She is shocked to see Yuki and Shigeru standing in front of her tent. Shigeru couldn't control his laugh. Yuki asked him to stop laughing and took Tohru to his house. Tohru asks if she can stay a little longer on their land and says she will pay for the rent. Shigeru says those cliffs are pretty unstable and a very dangerous spot to stay in a tent, mentioning that a young girl can't live alone for a month in the forest. She quickly denied it and said she could live alone in the forest. She might have willpower, but she has been working really hard lately and got exhausted and passed out. Yuki quickly runs to her and finds that she has a high fever. At that moment, they heard a wolf howling, and Shigeru told them that part of the cliff had crumbled. She asks how he can tell the cliff is crumbling, and he says it's his animal instinct. As the three of them leave the home to check for the place, they find her tent buried under the sands. She starts to cry because her mother is still in there. Shigeru comforts her, telling her that her mother doesn't want her daughter to get hurt, and that's why they bump into each other. Later, she tells them that she missed the chance to say see you to her mom one morning, after spending a whole night studying for the exam. Unfortunately, her mother died on that day, and that's the only morning she didn't say it. She has been thinking about quitting school and getting a job instead, but her mother always wanted her to get into high school and have those experiences that her mother couldn't, and Tohru fell asleep. Yuki is surprised because he always knew Tohru as a cheerful girl in his class, but he never imagined that she had been through so much. Back in the day, Yuki always wanted to break free from the Sohma family, but he was not brave enough to live a simple life in a tent. He was amazed by her courage and wished to help her. He asks Shigeru to take care of her and tells him that he is going to dig out her belongings. When Shigeru asked if he was going to dig the sand alone, Yuki's eyes turned red, and he said, "I have plenty of friends." Tohru is dreaming about her mom, who is telling her not to push herself too much and to just be herself, and live life at her own pace. Tohru wakes up and rushes to dig out her mom's photo. Yuki hands over her mom's photo and belongings to her. She is shocked to see that Yuki did it all by himself. She asks Yuki how he managed to bring her belongings. He says he can't tell her, and he asks her to stay with them until her grandfather returns from his renovation. Shigeru butts in and asks if she is good at cooking and cleaning. Tohru said yes. Shigeru smiled and welcomed her to his home, and they both walked away. But Tohru says she can't stay with them and doesn't want to be a burden on them. She has no place to go, so Yuki tells her to stay with them, which is the only option she has right now. Tohru asked if she had to follow any rules and regulations for staying with them. Yuki smiled and asked her to just be herself and live life at her own pace. Tohru is surprised to hear the exact same words from Yuki, and her inner voice says, "You are really a mystery person, Yuki." Shigeru asks Yuki if he is really okay with letting a girl stay with them. As long as she doesn't hug him, she won't be able to reveal his secret, so Yuki said it's fine. Meanwhile, Tohru is wondering about Yuki's parents and where they have been living. At that moment, a strange guy broke into their home and challenged Yuki to a fight. Yuki told him that he would never lose to a weak guy like him. As the two of them were about to fight, Tohru asked them to stop and slipped. She accidentally hugged him and fell down. She is shocked to see a cat on his clothes and begins to babble about a guy who got turned into a cat, so she tries to take him to the doctor. Unexpectedly, a wood piece hits her head, and she falls onto them. Yuki turns into a rat, and Shiger turns into a dog. At that moment, they received a delivery package. Tohru was frightened by their weird power and told the delivery man that they were all animals, but he thought they were just pets. Shiger signed the receipt using his stamp. As the delivery man leaves, Shiger explains that the Sohma family is possessed by zodiac animal spirits, and they will turn into animals if their body is weakened or hugged by the opposite sex. Yuki Sohma is the rat, Kyo Sohma is the cat, and Shiger Sohma is the dog. 10 other Sohma family members are similarly possessed by the zodiac animal spirits, and it's been this way for generations. He says that they won't have any super cool powers, all they can do is communicate with fellow animals, and they automatically turn into humans after sometimes being completely naked.